So then you have flies as plague number 4, and there's a Kepri, there's a god of creation. And creation is kind of a bigger concept than just like the world's creation. It's just like creation kind of as a concept. And it's interesting because I think that this is also something that applies to the modern world because how many people do you know that kind of worship novelty or in anything that's new? You guys familiar with? Have you guys ever had somebody come up to you and be like, "Oh, here's this new book that's really great. You have to read it." And
well, this is kind of Apple's whole marketing strategy, right? It's that we do worship novelty. My old phone works fine, but this is the new one.
Right, and it's amazing how people can actually have their life revolve around that feeling that you get from having something new, and it's a brilliant marketing strategy from Apple because the difference between the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 12 are so minuscule, and yet people they'll stand in line to get it, to be the first one that gets it when it comes out, and to be the early adopter, and every just the idea of novelty. But there's also novelty just in the way that the latest and newest ideas or philosophies or faiths. When the Celestine prophecy came out, I had people that were like, "Oh, this is so amazing! You got to read this book." And I read it, and I was confused. And I went and I said, "You realize this is fiction, right? Like this isn't really how things are." Or The Secret, or what I'm saying, like
their itching ears want to hear. There's the desire, I think, to be in the know, to have the thing. It might even be, I've got this phone, but by implication, you don't. Since I was the first, you weren't the first, or I've got it, you don't have it. Having that super knowledge or whatever you want to call it, I have it. You should come to me if you want to hear about it. Now I can tell you about it, whatever.
Right. Yeah,
the source.
I remember as a kid wanting to be the first kid that saw the new movie that was coming out, because you could go to school and tell kids about it. And,
what a waste of time. I did that so much, actually.
So then there's the Plague of Livestock, and this is Hathor, and this god had a cow head or face, and it was a god, interestingly enough, of love and protection, and there's a certain number of people who, love is the god. And I think, even times in history, like the 80s, I think about all the 80s music that I really like, and they certainly did make a god out of love, but not love like a Christian would see it, but the feeling of love.
Sure. Journey has a song where, and there's a couple of songs that come to mind where it's a story about the boy and it's a story about the girl, and then they come together and everything's better.
I think, in the ancient world, and in fact, probably up until maybe 100 or so years ago, they had a pretty sober view of what marriage was and what it was going to do for you. Now, it was something to be celebrated, and it was good, but it was also work, and it wasn't going to solve all of your problems, and it wasn't going to make your life feel completely fulfilled. You know what I'm saying? Like there was a more realistic view of what it was going to do for you, and what's happened in the world is that I think that we turned it into something that, because God was largely taken out of the world, we turned love into the God, and the problem was it was never going to be able to live up to that. It was never going to fulfill it. And so the interesting thing is really that you see, as a result of that, you see kind of in the grunge movements of the 90s and even lasting into today, what you see is the children of those marriages saw family as being not a wonderful place. It was very toxic to them. And so in the 90s, it turned into a nihilistic view, because even love was shown as being not worthwhile. And now, they don't even have, it's not even on the radar. And it's really weird that there can be such a generational divide. It's strange to me that a religious leader can say, well, I think that the church's definition of love is too narrow, I'm going to walk away from it, and not notice the next generation coming up that doesn't believe in it at all, because all they've seen is love falling apart. It isn't, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that seems weird. Apparently it doesn't to you guys, but.
Well, not in the same way. I think, whether you see it as too narrowly defined or too widely defined, I mean, we redefine it at our own whim and not as God defines it at our peril. I mean, there's a place, I think of the more functional aspect of the ancient mind as far as when you get married. So when I was a kid, I remember I had a conversation with my brother, who's a year older than me, and my mother, and we were talking about why you get married. And my brother's reasons were purely financial, because you will have more income power or whatever. I don't remember exactly what he said. But my response was, well, it's about love, man. I mean, we couldn't have had two more completely different responses. And it's neither one of those things. Yeah. There's a different balance, and we have to rely on what God says, and we do it at our peril. If we decide, I'm going to do it for financial reasons only or whatever, or romantic notions like I did.
Yeah. Chad, you're oddly quiet in this segment.
I'll agree with you. When the Bible says something that's contrary to our ever-fleeting desires, we ignore it at our peril. Yeah. And
that's all there is to say about that.
Yeah, much.
Okay. Well, let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, are we in the midst of plagues? Are we in the midst of an apocalyptic time?
Mosquitoes have been bad this summer, I will say.
The gnats? Like I'm looking at the list, and the Nile has not turned to blood, but a lot of these seem to be happening.
I was working on a bicycle the other night, and there's nothing worse than that high-pitched whine of flapping wings right in your ear. So, every 3 seconds.
No. Yeah, that's great.
Was one of your children asking you questions?
Yes, it was his wife.
Oh, you mean literally there was a bug in your ear?
Yeah, just kept flying
Did
around.
you say wife?
Going
I thought wife. I thought wife, but I said I'll make it one of his kids instead.
I can't believe you did that. You wimped out. So, yeah, I think that it kind of bears looking at whether or not we're in a plague now. Because one of the questions that I get asked quite a bit from people actually is do you think the end times are coming? Are these portents of the end times? And my typical answer is that probably not. That there's throughout history there's cycles of this kind of thing that happen. And so what do you guys think? Are we in the midst of our own cycle of plagues here?
Well, I think that, since I live in the United States, that's the nation I can speak to. I think we have some things to answer for. Okay. And I suspect that if not now, there will be a time coming sooner or later. I don't know. It's hard to say. I only know today. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are some things that I see that could be directly related to the sins of our nation. And it wouldn't be I would never say with confidence that's exactly what God's doing here, but it wouldn't surprise me. And when I'm thinking of those things, I think it's important to say, well, what in my life isn't aligned with God? And if a plague were to come because I deserved it, like God planned here, well, I better deal with that. And maybe God is trying to open my eyes up, because 10 times Pharaoh gets to be confronted, and he had a chance 10 times. We all are given lots of opportunities to go, you know what? I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing here. I need to do something different. I need to submit.
What do you think, Chad?
I think that, even within my brief, on a historical scale lifetime, I've seen many people, kind of make that claim that we're in the end times, and even in 45 years here. And and none of them have been right yet. But I also recognize that at some point there is going to be a generation that will be right when they think so.
Right.
And the Bible gives you every indication that you're kind of supposed to recognize the signs of the times when they come as well. So, I think when you see unusual circumstances and things of this sort, I think it quite naturally makes us want to kind of look and be. But I think you can also look throughout history, and I think, I think if I'd have been alive at the beginning of World War II, I might have been pretty convinced that, say, Hitler was the Antichrist
Right.
and things of this sort. So, I haven't closed the door on it by any stretch, but I'm also, just careful not to run away with it as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that we should be wise to understanding is that there are a lot of repeating themes in the Bible, and that's because God is a God of justice. And so one of the things that I find really interesting is we have a culture that will largely see God as, he's dressed in white robes and he's an old man. And when we talk about something like plagues or something like that happening, there's a lot of people that would view that as kind of God sitting up on some kind of celestial throne and kind of zapping the world, almost like Zeus throwing a lightning bolt. There's an element of capriciousness in that, I think. And I don't think that God... So we have to be careful. God is a person. God has wrath. God has all those things. But God is also just, which means that it's not going to happen until it's deserved. And there's a connection between the action and the consequence that's really important. Now, in saying that there's an action or a connection between the action and the consequence, you can be too loose with that and then you end up with Zeus and his lightning bolts. But you can go too firm with that, in which God is not part of the equation at all. It's just natural law, whatever that might be. I think we need to look at this and understand that God is part of the equation, and yet he's also very just. And so the actions and the consequences come together.